Hello, 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 and welcome back to Tando's Parlor. I am back again with another video. I felt like dressing up today, so I'm wearing what normally would be Venus Day attire with all the pink, and instead I'm wearing it on a Sunday. And funny story about the gloves before we start. I bought these gloves a few years ago when I was thinking about doing content creation, as I have thought about it for so long and never actually done it. And I thought it would be really, really nice to do like an old Hollywood glam / retro inspired look, or just, just to look and feel like a lady to wear some gloves. I finally get them out of storage, put them on, and as I'm putting them on, because they are delicate, and as delicate as I look, I'm not always delicate with the things that I own. While pulling them up, I tore the lovely gloves. I will try and sew them and to repair them, but maybe I'll just get another pair as well because I like the look. It was worth it, and I really enjoyed the little photo shoot that I did before this. So I hope you can enjoy the look as well. Anyway, I just thought I'd address that because you'd probably notice it, and now there's nothing to wonder, right? Okay. Today we're going to be talking about the father wound. Freeform, because I just think it's a little bit more personable that way. But I do have notes that I wrote last night, and depending on how long it goes for and how I feel, depending on if I end up channeling, because I don't always ask when I'm channeling, sometimes spirit just comes through as well. So depending on how it goes will depend on the length. If it starts getting a bit long for me, I will stop the video and do a part 2. I do have a feeling I'll need to do more than one part on this. But yeah, I hope you can enjoy. I always think it's useful talking about concepts by talking about my personal experience. I have decided to show up as an example to the world, and so it's best for me to discuss my own life as a backdrop for the conversations that I want to foster amongst us all. So let me tell you about my father wound, okay? My father was someone who wasn't really ever in my life. Him and my mother weren't ever together. And then my mom got pregnant. And while my mother was pregnant, this man refused to claim the pregnancy. So I heard later on. He outrightly said it wasn't his, which was a hard one for my mother because she was a teen mum and a late teen, like 19. And it was already hard because of the societal response. My heart really aches for what she went through being a young teenager and being ostracized for something that happened once, and having people color her with a particular brush, not really knowing the circumstances behind it either, but not caring because she was already pregnant. Long story short, I was born. My mother was like, I'm at the hospital. You want to do a DNA test while we're here? Mans goes, nah, I knew it was mine all along. We don't have to do all that, which irks me to recount. So yeah, and if I remember correctly, he left for the UK when I was about 4, and he probably would have seen me occasionally, but quite rarely at that age. I don't really have super early memories available to me. I know some people do. I would say my earliest memories are probably around 5. Yeah, I can't recall much of what happened. I do have like one particular memory that could have happened before then that was pretty traumatic, and that's the only thing I remember. But anyway, so he left for the UK, started a new life, away from me. Now, I don't recall him or knowing about him or who he was, but I do recall the day that I found out about his existence because growing up, I thought that my sibling's parent was my own. So I guess maybe because he was so affectionate and he did really treat me well, he genuinely did. I don't recall any negative vibes because children can sense when you don't like them and when you think that they're an inconvenience. I never sensed that from him. He always had all the time and patience for me. Bought me chocolates. That was very important to young me. And he seemed to set aside some time for me and stuff. And so up until then, that was the male figure that I associated with fatherhood, but not in the way that other people experience fathers, where they grow up with you on the day to day. This was a man that I saw sometimes, because he didn't live in the same city as we did. But I was 9 and I was playing outside, and one day my mum asks me to come into her room, and she's like, "Hey, so funny story. You know that guy that you call dad all the time? Yeah, not your actual dad. Your actual dad is in the UK. He moved there. He didn't seem to want to be in your life." I'm paraphrasing, obviously. Um, and so that's why it wasn't really important for us to have this conversation beforehand. My mother is an earth sign. I will preface by saying that if you know anything about astrology, I hope that gives you everything that you need to know. Um, it didn't seem important at that stage because it seemed like clearly he wasn't interested. We have a good setup going on right now, but he's gotten in touch. Apparently, he's interested in having a relationship with you and he wants to talk to you. So, how do you feel about that? It was, when books say that it was like the whole world flipped and turned on its axis and everything went upside down, and it was very disconcerting. It was one of those moments for me because you can't conjure that situation. Like, I don't know why I'm wanting to cry. I guess vulnerability, but there was no way I could have guessed that that was going to be the conversation and that the person that I thought was my father wasn't my father. And so it was really, let me grab some tissues just in case, because I still want to make this video, but just in case it gets a little emotional, hang on a sec. Tissues on hand. I think just because I've processed something doesn't mean if I'm conjuring, because I don't daily think about this day in particular, but I think these days I do often think about my younger self and the way that she experienced the world, and I actually hold a lot of space for that, and I really allow myself to feel the emotions that I was told to suppress when I was younger because I was a bit of a sensitive crybaby, and a lot of people in my life just wanted me to shut up instead of expressing my emotions. So now, when you're watching me get teary thinking of that memory, it's actually a positive sign because normally I can, through intellectualizing, what I used to do is I would think of these things and feel nothing, absolutely nothing. Um, a lot of my trauma responses have been numbness. And so I can appear very cold. And it's just because I was taught and built up a shell of not expressing my emotions. And so it's actually really good that I'm feeling teary about this because I'm only empathizing with myself. And I think that's really beautiful. Okay, back to where I was. So, yes, I couldn't have envisioned at that point in my life that anything like that would have happened. And being the little Libra that I am, and now that I know myself, my immediate thoughts were about why on earth am I finding this out now? Because it's not how I would have handled it. even though I was a young child, I think I've always, to some extent, been bothered by how people do things because I'm like, that's not how I would do it. And so that was one of my first thoughts was like, why am I finding this out now? That really irks me because I wish I had just known this whole time. Though I understand that, because I'm an adult, people deal with things based on their own stuff, what they have available to them, what tools they have available to them. I, if anyone, know more than anyone what my parent has gone through in her life. And so I can empathize with the thought process behind it. And I know how their mind works, right? But anyway, let's set that aside. This is about my experience. So it was hurtful. It was really hurtful too, because someone that I thought was really, really nice, my sibling's parent, was so nice and he was so lovely. It really hurt that he wasn't my parent intrinsically, because, or biologically, I should say. I mean, he was acting like my parent, but it was just really saddening, right? That someone that I cared about and that I thought cared about me, importantly, for me, um, it shouldn't have, but it did kind of make me wonder if he was taking pity on me um, when he was being nice to me because of my circumstances. So I did think that even at that young of an age. Once I found that out, I then was starting to question, everything. Because now it seemed like life as it was no longer, it was no longer what I thought it would be. Anyway, this is taking way too long. I've barely gotten into anything. Okay, I found out about my father. We have a phone call, and he was pleasant, you know. He just wanted to know how I was doing in school, which ended up being a pattern. He wanted to know how I was doing in school. I believe I had a birthday coming up soon, and he asked me what I wanted, and I remember I wanted like a pink Barbie watch, and I wanted all these things, and he said, done, I can do that. So then he sent me my first package from the UK. And it was some things that we had discussed, but there was a lot missing. And that was the beginning. That was the beginning of really learning and understanding who he was as a person. So then after that, when he did contact me occasionally, I would tell him my wants and needs, and it actually didn't really take long. Maybe he sent me 2 packages, at separate times, maybe separate years, that had part of the things that he said he would do. It wasn't even always me going out of my way to be like, hey, since you're my father. In fact, it wasn't. I think it was his way of wanting to show love and care. I wouldn't even call it affection, because wait till you hear the rest. And so he would make all these promises, and then he wouldn't keep it. Then I did hear some things growing up about times that he would offer to pay for things like school fees, just like he would offer to buy me things, right? Like, okay, what's her fees coming up next term? By the way, my mother was paying for me to go to private school because I was in Zimbabwe and she wanted to give me the best possible outcomes. So she was affording to send me to private school by herself. Private school is very expensive. And so he comes in randomly into my life, starts acting like he wants to rescue everyone, offers to pay, doesn't. So I am hearing these things because when you're a child, whether adults want you to be there, want you to listen, want you to talk, you are there hearing and listening what's going on around you, no matter how much adults want to pretend like you don't absorb these things. So yeah, then I'm starting to realize he has a bit of a pattern. We moved to Australia. I'm 12, and it'd been a while, but he contacts us again. This time I'm annoyed because I have the data from when I was 9 to now when I'm 12, and I haven't seen anything of substance in this person, right? Mind you, yes, I would get occasional calls, but it was more likely I would get emails. And in said emails, he would sign them off as regards father. Love, love that. I think that was perfect, actually. It was a really good reminder to me of how he saw himself. He saw himself as a concept, a father figure. He didn't actually think he was my father. He didn't think he was my dad. He thought he was a father, like a concept of father, of fatherhood. And whenever he would email or give me the one a year phone call, it was really just to appease, to uphold the imagery of fatherhood so that he could spend the other 364 days, you know, telling people that he was a father with all these children. I was really getting exhausted by having to perform daughterhood with him when I didn't really feel like it was necessary. And already being an air sign, I'm very detached in most things. So now I'm like, at this point, even though I'm 12, I'm performing being your daughter. You don't really care about my day to day. Apparently, you won't even pay for my school fees. You'll call me, ask me what I want, stupid things like, oh, do you want a PS5? Do you want a laptop or whatever? You won't even do that. So at 12, I picked a fight with him and I was like, I don't really want to keep having these conversations because I don't really see what the point is. And he did something that irks me to this day, which is underestimate me. He and so many people in my life, family, friends, strangers, just underestimate me. And I think it's because of my sensitivity. It's because people know I'm a nice person. And that's the trouble with being a nice person is people think that they're entitled to or think that they can take advantage of you, right? And so he told me that I was only saying these things off of the back of my mother slandering him. Well, let me tell you something. If there's one thing I will applaud my mother for doing is not slandering that man, okay? She did eventually tell me everything that transpired between them when I was about 16. But up until then, the whole philosophy was once he contacted to say he wanted to be in touch, she told me, and she just let me speak to him. And she said it was up to me how I wanted to handle my father. She said that from when I was 9. She was saying that then when I was 12, because I told her my grievances. I remember like before I even constructed an email, and I was like, I don't really like enjoy these conversations because he keeps asking me for things. He keeps acting like he cares, but I don't really see it in the actions. And like, I don't want to keep having these backs and forths. Excuse me. I don't know if that's me channeling because I'm always yawning when I'm channeling. I don't want to keep having these backs and forths. And she was just like, hey, it's your father. Why don't you just be honest with him about how you feel? And so I was. So I write him this long email. Can't even remember what I said now. It's so long ago. And I couldn't be bothered going back to our emails to check so that I could report to you more accurately what I said. Sorry. Um, and yeah, I just told him that. And that's when he said, it's because of your mom. So immediately I'm like, red flags, because my mom has actually had nothing but restraint about you, I'm sure. And I can tell that she's holding a lot in. Um, And I was irked, especially because I always had I was so headstrong as a child. You could call me everything. You could call me sensitive. You could call me a crybaby, but I was very headstrong as a child. It's that Aries descendant, okay? I was just a force to be reckoned with. And it really annoyed me that he thought I couldn't conjoin the dots by myself based on what little experience I'd already had with him. And I told him as such. I was like, I don't know why you would think that I would need anyone else to give me an opinion about you when I've experienced you myself. And I can tell you, based on our interactions, that you have been nothing but a disappointment, right? Long story short, didn't hear from him for a while after that because he hated every moment of that. And I heard he was older than my mum, maybe at least by 10 years, maybe more. And so I'm sure at his mindset, having this little 12-year-old girl asserting herself like that probably pissed him off. He was probably like, who the fuck do you think you are? And I love to bring everything back to astrology. I mean, if you know anything about Sun in the 12th, my Sun is in the 12th house, and it can point to an absent father physically or emotionally, and mine was physically and emotionally absent. And so, yeah, that was my lot in life. Anyway, fast forward a few years, and maybe give it a couple of years, and he starts calling again once a year, and or he gets into this rhythm of emailing me on my birthdays, always signing it off, regards, father. So I'm just going to tell you up until now where we're at, and then I'll go into what it taught me. So I guess this is going to be a long video, but I feel that this is a very important topic and needs to be discussed in the details that it needs to be discussed in, right? And so, okay, let's take it to when I'm 17. I don't know if he called or he messaged, but he essentially said that he had his friend moving to Australia or had already moved there, and he was planning, to send me a package and send it to his friend, and I could go collect it. Now, mind you, my father has, if I remember correctly, 4 girls. There could be more. Different women. I think 2 of them are definitely by another, like one person. He's had all girls, which we know biologically the men are in charge of what sex, so he's all females, which I think is interesting. By the way, he's a Scorpio. I always liked saying that because I was very against Scorpios for a very long time, just by association. So he has all girls, and he's like, okay, I am buying the girls a gift. No, actually, he'd already bought it. So what he said was, I bought the girls laptops, but I know you like reading books, so I've gotten you a tablet. And my first thought at 17 was, why didn't you get me the laptop that you got everyone else? Why do I get something different, firstly? Secondly, let's talk about, this is my thought process, right? Let's talk about the value of those two things. On a laptop, I can also read digital books, but then I can do other things. And I don't recall if I had a laptop personally at that stage. But my thought process was, I actually wish you'd asked me, because if you'd asked me, I would have picked the laptop that you got everyone else, because I could get every functionality I need on that as opposed to a tablet. And it was a tablet as opposed to a Kindle. Doesn't matter, because honestly, I'm not even fussy when it comes to gifts. It was about the posturing. Even though I was 17, I could see that it was posturing, because if he truly cared to buy me something that meant something to me, he would have asked me before he purchased it so that I would have been happy. But he was posturing and acting out fatherhood as he had done my entire life. And so it was really another point of disappointment that I didn't need. As usual, he'd come up in my life while everything was going well to drop a shit sandwich on me. Anyway, long story short, I go to his friend's house. I went there with my best friend Dylan. He's my longest best friend. And we got to this guy's house, met him. This guy was determined to see Dylan as my boyfriend. He was getting excited, and I'm sure he passed the message on to my dad. Despite me saying it's just my best friend, he happened to be sleeping over on the day that you said you were available, and he was happy to come along, and so now he's here. And the reason he got excited is because culturally in Zimbabwe, men pay dowry for the women. So as soon as he saw that I potentially had a boyfriend, I knew he was going to relay that information to my dad. And that would have excited my dad, because even though he wasn't involved, he still would have some ability or rights to come in if I decided to get married and make some sort of claim on part of the dowry. So I was really annoyed that entire visit because I could see the gears and the cogs turning in this friend's mind, seeing me with my bestie there. He gave me the tablet, whatever. I had it. I used it. It's gone now. It's died. I'm not being dramatic. I've used it. It's over. It's done now. So that was 17. 18 came. I studied. Didn't really want to go to uni because I wanted to take a gap year, but my mom was like, "We don't do gap years here. We're Africans." So put that idea at the back of your mind. I'm like, okay. My dad contacts me around the end of the year as I'm wrapping up year 12. He's like, how are you doing? How's school? What are you going to study in uni? Da, 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 da. Now, every conversation growing up was about how I was doing in school, what I was going to do later on. And I have a feeling it's because my father could always see my potential. He didn't really care enough to be my father in the day to day. But I think my father saw me as like a potential future meal ticket, a future investment that if he just like checks into like once a year, that's enough to like grow the seed, and then come in and claim his prize later on. He asked me so much about uni. I was like, "Are you going to help me pay for uni? Because uni is expensive." Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Tell me like how expensive is uni in Australia? I give him all the information, yada yada yada. And from that point to about my mid-20s, never heard from him again. And that's because I tried to contact him one other time after that, once I had started uni, to be like, "Hey, I did start uni. You said that you were interested in contributing to my higher education. Would you like, this is your chance. I have started uni now. This would be the perfect time for you to financially contribute." When I was younger, these things were happening as one-on-one conversations between him and my mother. This was the first time I was asserting myself and putting it out there that I would like his help on something that he promised that he would do. And nothing. I didn't hear back. And so to me, that was all the information I needed. I had already evaluated him accurately before I was 12, when I was 12, after I was 12. Now I was 18, and I was like, "No, you really are a deadbeat. You really are a piece of shit." Bet. Never checked my emails. I might have blocked him on emails actually, because that was his primary way to contact me. And I didn't hear from him for years because I know what he was avoiding. He was probably just thinking, "I'll wait it out. Let's give it 3-4 years max of uni, pop back in her life. It all will be good." And he has popped back in my life, and he has been blocked again. Okay. But let me tell you what this man taught me. One of the first things he taught me is some people don't really care what comes out of their mouths. They will promise you anything and everything. And he reinforced something that has become a really strong part of my value system. One of the things I really want to recommend when I'm talking to you and when you're watching this channel is to really figure out your own personal value system, because it's all good, it's all well and good to follow the Bible, follow the Wiccan Read, follow whatever text that you want, but I want you to personalize those values and not it just be a blanket, "Oh, well, we know that that's what good people do." Because I think when you're not personalizing it, you don't really care. It doesn't have a personal association to you. And so it's much easier to fall out of the bounds of your own value system because you haven't defined what the values are for you and to you, right? I always check my microphone because I've been caught out too many times. So I need to make sure it's on, otherwise I have to refilm everything and it's the worst. Okay. It actually ended up being a wound that I noticed in one of my most significant relationships. And definitely as a late teen, early 20s, I actually made the connection because I realized, and you'll know this if you know me personally, I detest people that talk about the same things and don't do anything about them. In the sense of, you talk about wanting to do something, but you don't want to do it. You talk about hating something in your life, you don't want to take action to it. And when people make me promises that they don't keep. And it's not about, I'm not just placing everything, I'm not just letting you hold the weight of my father wound when I'm annoyed that you've made a promise you can't keep. Because I'm a very nice person. I will continue to tell you that. Don't care if you believe it. You'll meet me one day if you're lucky and you'll see it for yourself. Use your own eyes, use your own intuition and discernment. I am a nice person, I'm very reasonable, okay? If you tell me you're going to do something, and this is very small, and that's why I take things I say by mouth very seriously. You'll know that if you know me in person. If I tell you I'll do something and I can't do it, you will see me rushing to apologize, rushing to say, hey, at this point, I said I would do X. Now this has happened and I can no longer do X. Can we reschedule? Can I do it another time? I can't afford it anymore at this stage. Can I do it on my next payday? I can't do it anymore because I'm really exhausted. Would you mind if you wait an extra day for me to do the thing that I said I would do? And most people I find don't even care because most people are used to people just speaking and then not doing it. But I want to create a world and I want to foster relationships, and I have fostered relationships wherein what we say matters. And when there is a change, I need you to communicate that. So this has affected me in more ways than you can even. This is something that could actually take up a really big chunk of time for me to discuss. This can be as simple as you've told me that you and me are having dinner tomorrow. Tomorrow is Monday. Tomorrow comes, I'm expecting we're having dinner at 6 like you told me. But then you message me 2 hours before and you say you can't do dinner. I really, really have struggled. I think now I don't care as much because I think I've accepted that a lot of people are disappointing. And because now I pour so much intentional love into myself and keep my own promises, I'm less affected by other people not keeping theirs. But I also don't want to enable that in people that I'm close with. So if you're someone I'm close with, you will probably see that this is a really big wound because I can't even always help the way that I respond to it. I can get very easily and quickly defensive. People canceling things last minute, I will probably let it go for a few times. But in my head, I'm like, surely you knew a little bit beforehand that you couldn't do this, but you've waited until right before we're going to do something. So to me, you didn't care enough to let me in on the thought process beforehand. But I understand some people, maybe you were fighting it. Maybe all day you were trying to convince yourself you could do the thing, but you don't do the thing. Okay. Then you say you want to do something that I didn't ask for. This is something that really gets my goat. Because now you've given me expectations. This is what my father did. He would give me expectations that I didn't have beforehand. I was satisfied with my life as it was and as my mum ran it, and whatever she could afford, whatever she could give was what I had. My father comes in. Oh, do you want this shiny new toy that you didn't hear about? Or do you want this shiny new toy that maybe you've accepted that isn't for your family at the present moment due to the socioeconomic situation? But here's this like fancy thing that everyone else has that you might have always really wanted. I'm going to give it to you. And then he just doesn't do it. And it's like, oh, you raised my hopes and then you stomped on them. That's how I feel when someone says something like, oh, Tando, I'm going to like crochet you this top. I only said that because I'm going to a crochet class after this. I wanted to crochet you this top. Here's what the top looks like. Girl, I'm going to have this done for you in 2 weeks' time because I'm just finishing this project, but it normally takes me like a week to finish a crochet top. So definitely within 2 weeks' time, you're going to have this crochet top. Do you know what happens in my mind and what used to happen a lot more in my mind? I'm counting down. Okay, in 2 weeks' time, I'm going to have a crochet top. I'm taking that seriously. In the same way, when I make plans with people people know, if you know me personally, if I make plans with you, I'm writing it in my phone because I am taking it seriously. You said you want to hang out with me? Okay, when? Okay, I'm putting it in my phone. And I'm expecting it's going to happen unless you say otherwise. And so if the day happens and you've forgotten, 6 o'clock comes, there I am at the restaurant, waiting. You don't show up. Crushing. This, every time people did things like that, it was like a crushing reminder that people are disappointing. It was a crushing reminder of why I was a hyper independent child that needed to do everything myself and really struggled to reach out for help, even in the depths of despair. Because I was like, people are going to fucking disappoint me. People are going to come in and say, no, I'm going to save you from the situation. No, you don't have to feel like this. No, you don't have to go through this. And then they're going to fuck off because that's what everyone else did in my life, right? That's how it felt, even when people that I knew loved me, even with people that I knew had their own wounds, people that I dated, people that just were in my vicinity. It really caused a lot of problems. And so I had to say it to one of my ex boyfriends, to my most significant and longest relationship. I had to say it to him. I had to say, I need you to really think before you speak. I need you to tell me what you want to do, when you want to do it, when you've made the decision you're going to do it. Or just do it and don't tell me and just surprise me because then you're actually bringing me the result. I detest false promises. I detest people that speak flagrantly, just throw their words around like nothing means anything. So that's something. So the negative thing my father taught me is that people aren't connected to morals and values, right? And that men in particular will come and give you all these grand promises, which has actually panned out in my dating life, and not be able to pull through. People, what they say, take it with a grain of salt. And how that led to hyper independence is, as the oldest child and as the black sheep of the black sheep, I was like, okay, so here are the facts. I've got a mother who does everything, and I admire her for that. At the end of the day, she has her faults, but I can see that she is someone who gets things going and gets results. She is someone who was ostracized for being pregnant young, ostracized for also being a very individualistic person. So, just like I am individualistic, so is she. Turns out we both have Venus and Mars in the 11th. We're both very much Aquarian in our expression. And so that causes weirdness and that causes us to stick out. And to an extent, in certain places and communities, we are ahead of the times in our thinking. My mom, I always tell this story as like a cute little tidbit, but my mom, when I was in Zimbabwe, would be driving me to school in her little Mazda playing Evanescence on a cassette tape. You best believe it wasn't every other Zimbabwean child listening to Evanescence on their way to school, okay? My mom was really cool and individualistic, and it really rubbed people up the wrong way. She was also someone and is someone who is quite strong in her masculine energy because she's had to, because she's been the only parent. So she's really good at achieving goals, really good at just taking action and getting things going that need doing, right? So I was like, okay, what are the positives I see in her? The fact that she can do what needs doing. She is smart, she is competent, she is cultured, she is beautiful. Okay, those are things that I want to emulate. Okay, what has my father taught me? That he's useless. That he's useless and that I am better off trusting myself, what I can see physically in my environment, versus what I can't see and like what I hope for and what I dream for. Because what I would hope for, what was my ideal, obviously would be in a beautiful two-parent household where mummy and daddy love each other and they love me and they keep all their promises and I don't have to experience any cooked things. But that wasn't the reality of my situation. The reality was I had a father who had actively denied me from the womb and then actively decided when he wanted to come in and out of being in my life and just said things to be the hero that I didn't need and then disappointing me by giving new expectations I didn't have and then smashing those. Dealing and healing from that disappointment was a long process. But what it involved was first naming it. I had to identify where it was coming from because in the early days of my responses in new relationships or new friendships to people not doing what they wanted was a little extreme. If you know anything about me, I'm very calm, cool, and collected in typical air sign fashion. Maybe you feel that when you're watching me. Maybe I give off those vibes. But it's very true. I am very cool, calm, and collected. And I try not to cause myself pain or havoc. I try and pick the easy route for me. I try and do things that come easy to me. I try and facilitate ease in my own life, ease and harmony in my own life in typical Libra fashion. Instead of just wanting to do it for everyone, I also really want that for myself. And so healing that aspect of that father wound first came with identifying that the reason that I would cry, freak out on people, have these very tense conversations about how and why people have disappointed me isn't because I'm this like hard ass, which even if I was, I don't know if that matters, but it's because I was really touching a sore spot within myself. Once I recognized that and could name it, I could then communicate it. And it went from communicating it reactively at first to starting to react to it or respond to it proactively by telling new people ahead of time that this is something that's really important to me. And sometimes if I'd forget, whenever they would do their first offense, I'd be like, hey, what you, and I'd be really calm about it because I prefer to talk to people when I'm really calm about things, unless I'm going through something and then you touch a sore spot on top of that, which happened recently with one of my friends. And so once that happened, in the initial reaction, I was very reactive and I had no ability to calm myself down and communicate the information in a way that would actually facilitate a healthy conversation and possibly change. But what happened was I was very reactive very recently because I was already going through some issues, which I won't discuss just yet. And then a friend did something that kind of touched on that wound. And it also touches on me not liking surprises to an extent. If you come and bring me flowers, love that. But if we make a plan and you deviate from that plan without telling me, this could include adding people to our plans without telling me. This could be changing the venue, changing what time, but it's all something you've decided in your own head, and I don't feel like you've included me as a part of the process. I detest that, and that rouses a certain rage within me because it opens up that wound and it gets me to look at it. And so, what I did recently was after the very tense in the moment where I couldn't control how I was responding to it, we later then had a very calm discussion about it, which is much more my preference, where I was able to say, hey, this is where it comes from. I don't like this. I've never liked this. It's not you. And so the reason I was really annoyed when we hung out and I was showing it is because you had done something that really steps a very sore spot still. It's not you, and I don't hold it against you. It was just in that moment, I couldn't help but be reactive. And now that we're talking about it, I hope you understand this is where I'm coming from. And so, in the future, if we have a situation like this, my preference would be for you to respond in this way and tell me or ask me if you want to make changes so that I feel like I'm a part of the decision making process. But when I'm going into plans and then you've just done a thing and I didn't know, internally, I can and I have felt like that's a personal attack and an affront on my person and my personhood, because I feel like I'm a very independent and autonomous person. I curate my life to be a, a way that facilitates ease and harmony for me. So when you make decisions that involve me, but you don't involve me in the decision making process, now I feel like you're undermining my independence, which is a very, very strong core value of mine. You are touching that sore spot and you're saying your autonomy doesn't matter. I know you're not doing that. This is how I'm reading it, and so I'm explaining it to you in case that that's actually how you respond, right? You're saying to me your comfortability isn't important, your independence isn't important, you're part of these plans, but your thoughts and feelings about these plans aren't important. My way of doing things is more important. And something I've actually had to explain a lot of friendships to, based on how I see the world, might not be how you, and it might not be how they do, and they can choose to not be my friend because of that. I think a lot of people do behaviors that they don't realize, whether or not it's intentional. You can definitely give the vibe that you think you're more important than the other person. I think that about people that are consistently late, but not because of ADHD, because I have a lot of ADHD friends. But it's like, it's about how you do it. It's like, are you telling me ahead of time that you're going to run late, or are you going to just show up late? Like, how it's about the communicativeness. If you're not communicating with me, ways in which you're not meeting the expectations of a social event or of hanging out with me as a person, then I just think that you don't care. And you think that you just don't care. And maybe it's because that's just how you've done things, or maybe that's how you do things in other friendships. And maybe they don't care. So you don't care, they don't care, you all do it to each other, and it's all well and good. Not over here, partner. I have very strict ideas of what makes a good relationship, friendship, relationship, etc. And I hold my friends to account within those standards because those are my standards. It's what matters for me. You want to be in my inner circle, you want to be part of this, you have to adhere to those standards. I'm not saying it removes your individuality. I'm saying you have to make concessions for me, like I will make concessions for you. My best friend Winea has ADHD, so she's always late to all things that we do. But I understand that it is part of her ADHD. And I understand because, one, she's very communicative. Two, if she's failed to communicate and I express a grievance, she is very appropriately reactive. She normally says how she viewed a situation. What did she think and what was she doing? She'll say, I didn't realize that you looked at it that way. Then she'll bring those two bits of information together and be like, okay, so from here on, now that I know that you did this, I'll do X, Y, and Z. And I might not be perfect every time, but I'm going to work towards it. It's giving accountability, it's giving communication, it's giving care, love, and attention. Okay. I'm not saying that I can't have relationships in my life that aren't perfect, because that's ridiculous. What I am saying though is a lot of what my father wound and working through it and recognizing it and working on healing it, what it actually has positively done for me is really made me knuckle down and figure out my value system. And a lot of my value system is the antithesis of my father's behavior toward me and in general in his own life. When I realize how many notes I have on the father wound, I realize that this is actually going to be probably a 10-part series. I mean, I'm just guessing off the top of my head because I'm nearing an hour now. And I don't think anyone has the attention span to go for more than an hour, not in this day and age anyway, with the way that people do social media. But at least what I want you to get from this video is you need to name in what ways your father has affected how you view your other relationships. How has he made you reactive? How have you put things on other people that don't belong to them? Once you name it and you expose it and you hold it out in your hand, as I do this pyrite, right? I want you to look at it without judgment. And I want you to look at it with compassion. I want you to go talking to your inner self. I like to do meditations where I visualize talking to my younger self or embracing them. You could also just look at yourself in the mirror and say some of these things, because I think mirror work is delectable and just beyond fantastic for you and your neural pathways. And yeah, hearing your own voice affirming you, looking in your own eyes, delectable. You look at one of them, because I have so many of the father wounds to talk about and the ways that it has affected me, and you say to yourself, Tando, I'm really, really sorry that your dad wasn't there for you in the way that other dads have been there for their children, or that dads are supposed to be there for their children. I'm really sorry that you went through that, and it was really unfair. It was really unfair that you went through that. I can't take away the pain that you went through as a child, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to embrace you more, because you deserve it and because you never received it from your father. I am going to acknowledge that because your father never kept his promises and always surprised you in very awful ways, always dysregulated you by taking you from calm and bringing you into troubled waters, and having you have to unpack all of that by yourself while he gaslit you, underestimated you, deflected. I want you to know that you are more than those actions. You are deserving of more. You, Tando, are deserving of love. You're deserving of the kind of love that he couldn't give, because that's a him problem, unfortunately. But what I will do is I will give you the love that he never gave. I will promise myself to keep my own promises. If I say I want to achieve a dream, if I say I want to try something for fun, if I say I want to follow a path, not for the accolades, not for the money, I promise myself that I am going to follow that path. I am going to show up for myself the way that no one has, but also I will allow other people to show up for me in the way that he never did. I will allow it, I will thank them, and I will accept it as it is, at face value, and leave it at that. I promise myself to be kind to myself. I promise myself to have grace and show myself grace when I respond reactively to my wounds being touched unwittingly by people. I promise myself to always communicate my needs, because only then can other people know how to fulfill them, and only then can I know who cares about fulfilling them and who does not. This is the kind of conversation you need to have with yourself. Okay? I want you to do that on a regular basis. I'm going to check my notes to see if there's anything I want to say now. If not, I will wait until the next installment. No, I think I'll save the rest of this actually for the next one, because I have so many notes on the father wound And actually, it's been Spirit who's really helped me decide to make this a thing. I think I would have always talked about it at some stage, but I don't know if I would have put in as much effort as I'm going to talk about it now. I don't know if you got anything out of this, but I certainly hope that you did. If you too have a father wound and have things that you have dealt with, things that you've unearthed, uncovered, things you've healed, I really encourage you to share with us all below. Tando's Parlour is a place, a safe space, especially for women, but also for men and others, all the genders, to come and unearth the things that we aren't talking about more, more, because we will talk about to the death, reality TV, the economy, but there are certain conversations I think collectively would really, really help us all societally shift and raise our vibrations. So please, when you watch this video and you get a download and you're like, oh my God, I didn't have the words for that, but Tando gave me the verbiage. I would really, really appreciate for you to comment. Let me know how it resonated, what you actually, what you got out of it, what you're going to journal about off of the back of this video, and maybe even more of what you want me to talk about. Is there an aspect of the father wound that you struggled with that you hope that I could talk or touch upon and maybe be able to communicate with you and assist you with being able to heal that? I hope you enjoyed, and until the next one, bye.